Hi, my name is Eon-Suk at Chosun University of South Korea. I'm going to explain this research that I conducted with my collaborator, Margaret McDonald. Music and language have significant similarities. In both music and language, infants show perceptual narrowing by their first birthday. Interestingly, bilingual infants process their environment differently from their monolingual peers and show continued flexibility through their second year of life. But we don't know much about how babies growing up in a bicultural musical environment process music. In this study, we address this question by investigating Korean infants' perceptual responses to Korean and Western music based on their experiences. Our study had three research questions. First, we investigate if Korean infants show preferential listening to Korean or Western music. Second, we ask how experience with the music attunes infants' listening preferences. Finally, we explore if bicultural Korean infants show indications of novelty orientation. Our participants included 49 Korean infants between the ages of 12 and 30 months. For stimuli, we had 4 Korean and 4 Western songs played on a cello and a hagum. Each stimulus was 20 seconds long. At the time of testing, we conducted a parental survey about infants' musical background. We tested infants using Hatton preference procedure, and this is what it looked like.
Hi, my name is Margaret McDonald, and I'll be talking about the results of the paper. The first research question asked if Korean infants showed preferential listening to Korean versus Western music. To answer this question, we took the listening times of the infants and entered them into a linear mixed effects model with maximal random effects. The results showed that there was no significant difference in listening times for Korean versus Western music. The second research question asked if infants' experience with music changed their listening times. And we found that infants that had more experience with music in their daily lives had shorter listening times on the task than infants that had less experience with music in their daily lives. We also examined how exposure to specific types of music affected infants' listening times. We divided infants into those with low exposure to Western music and high exposure to Western music. Overall, there was no significant difference in listening times for infants with low versus high exposure. However, there was a significant three-way interaction, such that infants that had high exposure to Western music had longer listening times when listening to Korean music played on the hagum, which would be a very novel experience for infants that are used to having a lot of Western music exposure in their environment. That leads us to the third research question. The third research question asked if Korean infants showed indications of novelty orientation. For this exploratory analysis, we examined younger and older infants separately since their performance was slightly different. For all infants, we coded familiarity on a trial-by-trial basis. We coded if a certain trial was familiar based on if the parent reported that that type of ethnic music was something that the infant heard regularly in their environment. So for example, for a piece of Western music being played, if an infant had high exposure to Western music in their everyday life, that would be coded as a familiar trial. However, for the same piece of music, if an infant was coded as having low exposure to Western music in their everyday life, that would be coded as a novel trial. For the younger infants, over the course of the experiment, listening times decreased, but listening times decreased at a similar rate for novel versus familiar trials. On the other hand, for the older infants, while listening times also decreased over the course of the trial, listening times decreased at a faster rate for familiar trials versus novel trials. We interpret this as indications of novelty orientation for these older infants based on their specific musical experiences.
In addition to these results, we found that infants who had a greater weekly exposure to music had higher CDI scores 1 year later. Our discovery that Korean infants do not show preference for Korean or Western music suggests a prolonged period of perceptual openness for infants raised in a bicultural musical environment. We propose that infants' interest in music is driven by two different types of curiosity, known as perceptual and epistemic curiosity. For more information, please refer to our paper and the supplementary materials on OSF. Thank you.